Live. Welcome back to Daniel Davis Deep Dive. My name is Harry Kaz. I am one of the new hosts here. That's going to be part of the channel. Hopefully, in the kind of a strange time. I have to say, I didn't expect to be, taking part in the channel when the United States looks like it's basically marching off to war at this point. I mean, we literally could be in a war with Iran the next few hours, minutes, who knows? I mean, actually, as we're sitting here right now, as I sit here talking to you from Orlando, Florida, Donald Trump is meeting with his national security team, Marco Rubio, I'm assuming Tulsi Gabbard, all the principals who would make that decision and help Donald Trump figure out what he's going to do on Iran. I mean, nobody's really sure, to be honest with you. We do know in the last couple hours that Donald Trump has put out some truths. I guess that's what you call them now. They're not tweets, they're truths. Sounds weird. To try and pressure the Iranians to back down, to give up, what is left of their nuclear program, whatever parts of it aren't in ash and rubble or radiological dust at this point. He's made some very interesting statements over the last couple hours, that's for sure, saying things like Iran must, quote unquote, unconditionally surrender. Now, I don't know if Donald Trump has been catching up on some World War II history. I'm not sure exactly where that came from. But I don't exactly think that Iran's going to be doing any sort of unconditional surrender anytime soon. That's just, my hot read of the situation. Maybe they will. I don't know. But I can say this much. Donald Trump is in a very precarious position. Over the last day, I've seen some things out of MAGA land that I didn't think I'd really see anytime soon. We had a really interesting discussion between Steve Bannon and his War Room podcast video and Tucker Carlson, who now operates the Tucker Carlson network, his own network, after he left Fox. And they did a really interesting multi-hour interview discussion where Tucker Carlson is interviewing Steve Bannon on the situation with Iran, and then Steve Bannon is interviewing Tucker Carlson. Me and my wife listened to it for about 3 hours last night, and I think we ended up falling asleep at about 11 o'clock. But by the time we didn't even get through it all. But I think it's pretty clear where the MAGA movement or the populist wing of the Republican Party stands at this point when it comes to an attack on Iran. Don't do it. Bad idea. Don't do it. And Donald Trump may lose a lot of support in MAGA because of it. Who knows? It depends, I guess, really what happens at this point and where things go in the next couple hours, maybe a couple days. Here's my hot take. Here's my prediction. You can call me to task if I'm wrong, but I have a feeling that the United States is going to attack Iran with at any moment. Could be tonight. My prediction, I think, is going to be tonight. I think that's where I'm going to settle. But I'll go as late as Thursday. I mean, the United States is moving a lot of military assets into the region. We're moving the Nimitz carrier battle group away from the South China Sea. I believe right now, according to the latest information, it's going through the Strait of Malacca, heading into the Indian Ocean, should be off the coast of Iran or within, Persian Gulf area within 3 to 4 days, depending on how fast it goes. It can go probably around 32 knots, something like that. Just depends on how fast those ships and can get there. We have B-2 bombers in Diego Garcia. We've had them there since April. So does that mean that this is something that Trump and Netanyahu have been thinking about for a long time, pre-positioning assets like that? I mean, those assets were attacking the Houthis, but it's a little bit overkill to send B-2A Spirit, stealth bombers that cost $1 billion each that you can't replace to attack the Houthis. It's just my take. But we've got B-52s, we've got Aegis destroyers, we've got the Carl Vinson aircraft carrier battle group within the region. We've got a lot of stuff that's there. That's not everything either. There's F-22s, F-35s, F-15s. The list is expansive, the amount of military equipment that are in the region. So what's going to happen? Well, I decided to look up an old friend that unfortunately, I haven't really got a chance to see physically since the pandemic. By the name of Doug Bandow. Now, many of you probably know Doug Bandow from the restraint and realism movement that's been sort of brewing in DC for, quite a long time now, quite a while. Doug's been at CATO for many years. And actually, between Doug Bandow and Ted Galen Carpenter, they're actually two people who have been changing my thinking over the years when it came to U.S. foreign policy and what our position should be in the world. And I would have you go back to look at some of Doug's previous writings in the National Interest, lots of other outlets. It seems like he writes 2 or 3 pieces a week, talking about what America's proper role should be in the world. And we'll probably get to all that. But first of all, Doug, welcome to Deep Dive. How you doing?
Happy to be on. Nice to see you. I wish you were still in the area, but I don't blame you for fleeing to Florida.
Yeah, we left. Like we said, I left back in 2022, and we'll talk about that some other time. It's kind of interesting story, but great to have you here. Good to have a discussion with you. I guess first, Doug, I just want to get your hot take. Do you think Donald Trump's going to strike Iran?
My betting is yes. When you move all those assets, into the region, the things that he said. I mean, clearly, I think he would be happier if Iran capitulated. So he's doing one element of this is to put pressure on Iran. But having done it, I just think it's, he really can't back away. He can't just take everything away. He can't walk away. He's going to move forward. And then we're into yet an unknown world and how, what happens there. And I think you're right about the MAGA movement. A lot of folks are going to be unhappy. It's going to take attention away from his domestic agenda. Oh my goodness. I thought things were going crazy before this. But throw in a war, and we're off to the races.
Yeah, that's for sure. I guess the next question is okay. So we're in agreement. Trump's going to do something to Iran. How far do you think he's going to go? I mean, there's a lot of commentary saying that he's got these B-2 Spirit bombers in Diego Garcia. Last thing I saw, Doug, there's about 6 of them there. Nobody really knows what the strike package is in those B-2 bombers. A lot of people have theorized that those 30,000-pound Buster bunker bombs. Do you think that Trump is just going to make a play and just hit Fordo, their underground, the Iranians' underground, nuclear research facility? Or do you think he's going to go further than that?
Well, my betting is that'll be the focus, is to try to take out the nuclear assets Israel probably can't get. Then the question is, can he preempt to prevent Iranian strikes on American assets in the region? I think that would be the issue. It's not clear to me what else he would want to hit, but he's certainly aware that the Iranians have the ability to hit American bases, that American personnel are going to be at risk. And if I was the Iranians, that's exactly what I would do. If I saw those bombers coming my way, I'd loose the missiles. So the question is, can he preempt that? And I think that might happen. He might try to do that, to kind of essentially what the Israelis did to a certain degree, to the extent you can go in there and try to lessen the strike back. I don't think he'd certainly be happy to see the regime out, but he doesn't strike me as the kind of person who thinks in regime change purposes. He'd be happy to make a deal with the current crew or a different crew. He'd like to have the deal, but at this stage, I don't think that he can walk away.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And I want to talk to you about regime change. Hold that thought for a second, because there's a lot to unpack there. But I want to talk about the Iranian response, because I think that's the key in all of this. Because we've seen in other instances where Trump will launch a strike on a military target like Hassan Soleimani. I think back a couple years ago when Trump launched his attack on Syria, which was essentially a nothing burger, but MAGA got very upset about that too. How do you think if the Iranians do respond with whatever missiles they have left? And there's big debates, Doug, about how many missiles they have, how many launchers, how accurate they are. But assuming they've still got some an ability to shoot, and let's say there are American deaths either in Syria or if God forbid they attack our base in Qatar or something like that. What do you think Donald Trump will do in response? Is this how this spirals out of control?
Yeah, I think that he would feel the need to retaliate. I mean, if you just listen to him, I mean, he did this on trade. I'm imposing all these things, and don't you dare do anything in response. And you think, dude, I mean, come on, of course they're going to retaliate. I think he's probably approaching this with the same thing, that if American bombers go out, I wouldn't be surprised, but he'll send out a statement saying, and don't you dare do anything to any of our people. And if they do, he'll feel the need then to do something more. And otherwise, I assume he'd focus on the nuclear, and in some ways he could walk away and say, I've done what I needed to do. If Israel still wants to bomb, it's up to them. But if they strike back, I think in his character, he's going to feel the need to do the last one. he's going to need to be able to go and pound his chest and say, see, we taught them a lesson.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So I'm gonna go back to regime change. Everybody's, I think, not so favorite topic in Washington. Or, I mean, if you're John Bolton or Lindsey Graham, it's your number one topic. Um, you know, I feel like this is a debate we just keep having over and over, whether it's in Washington or other capitals or other think tanks or all over the news cycle. And it's this predisposition by so many analysts to think that for some reason it's okay to just get rid of regimes that we don't like or have, different national interests with. And look, I used to be in the regime change crowd. I get it. I understand it. But we're in a different world, I think, Doug, than 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, the United States is $37 trillion in debt. We have a very different, world in terms of military technology and how advanced things are coming, especially with drones, cyber warfare. The instruments of American power, like aircraft carriers or even stealth bombers, they're being questioned by a lot of analysts, and rightly so. So thinking about this whole concept of regime change, do you really think that if things got bad enough, I mean, let's say we have Donald Trump striking Iran strikes our bases back, Trump strikes them again. Do you think that could put Trump in a position where he might actually endorse some sort of regime change? Do you think that's possible?
Well, the problem is it's one thing to endorse regime change. It's another thing to get regime change that you like. I mean, I think that Iraq has, to my mind, settled that question for us. And if that's not enough, well, throw on Libya. I mean, throw on a number of other examples out there. Oops, that didn't work out very well, did it? A decade later, 2 decades later, I mean, look at Syria. I have a great idea. Let's help try to overthrow Bashar Assad. 500,000 deaths later, he was still there. So the challenge with Iran is this is a complex society. They have a population of something like 90 million. We're talking about almost 4 times Iraq's population. It's an ancient civilization. It's a very factionalized leadership, but it's a radical one. There's no reason to assume that kind of the Iranian Thomas Jefferson shows up amid the radioactive rubble in Tehran, and we get a democracy and everybody says they love America. I mean, a lot of folks there did love America, but it's not clear they're going to love America if the result is we are bombing them as well as the Israelis. Netanyahu gave this, pitch about, oh, we're doing this for you too. And I just thought, look, if you're in Iran, you say, yeah, you've been killing Palestinians. Yeah, you have an apartheid state in the West Bank. Yeah, you are telling us you like us. You're doing that. I mean, come on, dude. And I think to me, that's the problem is we don't know what we're going to get. And imagine you simply have chaos in a country of 90 million people. Now, who is everyone going to call on to fix that? It's not the Israelis. It's not going to be the British. I mean, we all know everybody's going to say America's got to go fix that. And then the president's going to have to deal with the idea, well, you broke it, right? The Colin Powell's Pottery Barn, example, you break it or you pay for it. You're stuck with it. And to my mind, you're stepping into this, everything could go wonderfully, but we don't have many examples of that. It's much more likely to go badly and have human chaos, people dying, starvation, loose nuclear materials. I mean, you kind of spread this out.
Yeah, it just seems like the ultimate Pandora's box, and we keep opening these Pandora's boxes, Doug, over and over and over again. And you would think by now that we would have learned our lesson. And look, I want to be fair to Israel, Doug, to be honest with you. I mean, I like I said with Danny a couple days ago when we did the show, I can put myself in Netanyahu's shoes. I can get it. I can understand it. I mean, nobody wants to see Iran with nuclear weapons. I certainly don't. And I think a lot of the people that are in the MAGA movement are sympathetic to Donald Trump and MAGA. They don't want to see that either. But at the same time, if you do a very realpolitik sort of cost and benefit analysis, going after Iran's nuclear program creates a whole other set of problems. I mean, just thinking this through very logically, okay, let's say that there's some sort of ceasefire. I don't think there's going to be, but I mean, let's just say there is for example's sake. And the Iranians, they have to sort of recalculate things in their head. If I'm sitting in Tehran, I'm going to say to myself, yeah, well, guess what? Now I'm going to sprint towards nuclear weapons because I know that's the only thing that's going to probably protect me at this point. Do you think if things do cool down, do you think the Iranians are ever going to give up what nuclear assets they have? Do you think that's possible?
I can't imagine it because this really is proof positive of why they need a deterrent. And imagine you've devastated their society, and now you expect them to make a deal. Well, it's kind of late. I think the problem here was there was no forcing event. I mean, I share your opinion that I understand why Israelis, especially. I mean, I don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. I certainly understand why Israelis don't. But there was no forcing event. To me, the timing looks like Netanyahu wanted to make sure that there was no negotiated settlement. He was upset at the idea that there might be a negotiated settlement. So to me, this looks like he was trying to preclude that. I mean, the estimates that I've seen, no one suggests that they were close enough to have, a bunch of bombs deliverable and prepared to use them. I mean, no one wants to trust the Iranians, but everything I've seen, that leadership is ruthless, but very pragmatic. I mean, they get rich. They fight political battles against each other, whatever they might say about their religious beliefs. I just don't see them wanting to go out kind of a radioactive pyre in Tehran. So I just don't see any need for this. I think it was a preemptive strike, and it was to force Trump's hand, and it looks like he's allowing it to be forced.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of competing threats here that I think were always there, but I think it's hard in our day-to-day lives to put them all together. And you can dream up where things are going. I mean, like we talked about in the opening of the show, we're talking about B-2 bombers that were already in Diego Garcia in April, along with B-52s and other assets. So it seems, at least in my mind, that Trump was sort of telegraphing, okay, we're going to have negotiations with you, Iran. If you're not prepared to sort of, give up your nuclear program, the possibility of a strike is there. And it was kind of interesting too. I mean, they actually brought like a third of the B-2 bomber force, which, like I said, it's irreplaceable. There's no more B-2 production lines anymore. So a very substantive deployment there. I think that they were trying to get the Iranians' attention. Yeah, Doug, I want to sort of shift now to the international reaction and get your take there, because there's a lot of things that once the dust settles, wherever things sort of end up, there's going to be reactions and moves and counter moves by all the different great powers all over the world. I want to get your take on what you think the Chinese think about this. I mean, obviously they have a lot of money, invested interests in the Middle East. That's where their oil and all their resources come through. And so, if the price of oil spikes to $100, $150 a barrel, obviously that had huge ramifications for Beijing and lots of other things. How do you think the Chinese see this?
I think the Chinese are going to try to use this, especially in the global South, and to say, who is your better partner? Who is the country that, number one, is tied with Israel? I mean, Israel's reputation in the global South today is very low because of Gaza. So toss this on top. You don't have to like the Iranians to be horrified about, basically aggressive war, kind of a surprise attack, killing of civilians. I mean, they can kind of lay it on top. And I think they'll use that. And, the U.S. reputation is pretty bad because of its support for Israel after Gaza. And I think the same thing, especially if we go in and start bombing, that again, they're going to say, look, what country in the world is the most dangerous country? It's not us. They're going to point and say it's those guys. Yet another war. Yet another attack on the Arab peoples, or I guess Iranians aren't Arabs, but on third world peoples, or however you want to put it.
Right.
The kind of the identification of the global South is going to be much more with Iranians than with Israelis or Americans. And sometimes the Chinese get things very badly. I mean, boy, they've blundered with wolf warrior diplomacy and a lot of other things. But this is a moment for them where I think they can really make some gains. And, they're going to be looking at this themselves and realize America's power, but I think they're also going to be rather happy about it. My view on Afghanistan was that, of course, Russia and China would prefer that the U.S. stay there another 20 years. The notion that getting out was, gee, that gave them a signal that we were weak. No, they would much prefer to have had us stick around, please, be tied up forever. I think they're going to look at this as, bad in certain ways. I mean, they recognize the use of American power in certain ways is threatening even to them. On the other hand, from their standpoint, it's going to entangle the U.S. It's going to hit the U.S. reputation. I think they'll push that. The economics, they won't like it if they have to pay a lot more, but they won't be the only ones that are paying a lot more. Yeah, and again, they can use that as well. If they and global South and industrialized countries. I mean, even the Europeans who are not happy with the Iranians, but if the Europeans are having to pay a lot more, on energy and facing other things, they may start to worry a little bit about it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think we have to talk about what the possible Russian reaction would be. I mean, obviously, the Russians and the Iranians over the last few years have gotten a lot closer. They signed this new bilateral agreement that many people call a de facto alliance. I will be honest, I have not read the terms of the agreement, but some people say that in those terms that essentially that the Iranians could call for the Russians to help if the Americans got involved. So there's there's that, but also that those linkages have really grown. I mean, it's very clear that the Iranians are providing the Shahad drones for the Russians to use in Ukraine. How do you think the Russians see this, and do you think they see any advantages in the war for them, or ways that they can sort of mold it to their advantage, if you will?
My assumption is that from a Russian standpoint, this is bad. I mean, their position in the Middle East has really eroded. I mean, certainly the loss of Assad. I mean, even though Assad was much weakened, that they still, they had base there. They had an opportunity to kind of play in the region, and to lose that. I mean, this, Syria was an interest that went back decades. I mean, it went back to Hafez, Assad. I mean, the father of Bashar. So this is kind of yet another kind of destruction of their position in the Middle East. Now, does the regime survive? I mean, what does that survival mean? I mean, what can they do together? I would bet that Putin's not going to go to war with the U.S. over Iran. But this, I think, is going to make him even less likely to make concessions in terms of Ukraine. That he's really got to win that one. That if he's seeing his influence erode in the Middle East, he recognizes other people in the world are going to look at Russia as being weaker because of this. I think it makes it even more important for him to have what he can sell as a win in Ukraine, which unfortunately means the president's peace process, I think, is probably dead. I don't see that moving very fast, in the upcoming weeks or months.
Yeah, and I mean, the Russians look like they're prepping, an offensive. Some say multiple offensives for the summer, looking to make some big gains. Obviously, the United States isn't supplying them, maybe not even at all anymore, and the Ukrainians are running down their stock. So things obviously look very bad for Kiev at this point. I want to move, Doug, to the MAGA reaction, because for me, I think that's the most interesting thread in all of this. The MAGA revolt, if you will, the Tucker Carlsons, the Steve Bannons, the Charlie Kirks, all those people on this new right coalition that's been built over the last 10 years that are basically all screaming at the top of your lungs, don't do it, Donald Trump, don't attack Iran. What do you think happens if Trump does attack? Do you see people defecting? Do you see, the Marjorie Taylor Greens of others of the world, splitting from Trump, or maybe just a temporary couple weeks of bad blood with things, going back to normal eventually? Where do you see that going? Because I think it's pretty profound.
No, I think it's fairly fundamental. And we see how it get personalized. I mean, my understanding is that the president is now mad at Tucker Carlson, that because Tucker has been criticizing this misadventure. The president takes this stuff personally. I mean, he's mad at Rand Paul, who supported him during his first term because Rand Paul is complaining about the budget stuff. So I could see a fairly strong reaction because in the end, a lot of the MAGA folks, while they love Trump because they thought he believed certain things. And this is one of those issues where, I mean, Matt, Gates, from Gates of Florida. I mean, there are a number of these folks who, kind of radical MAGA types, who it turns out were very much critics of kind of the war, party, is what you would call it. Lindsey Graham and the others in the GOP. Their view was they were revolting against them as well as, DEI and wokeness and other sorts of things. For them, the kind of the perpetual war, the endless war, was part of the package. So I could see them stepping back and being quite critical, less supportive of other initiatives. And I think the president's not going to take it well. And the problem for the president is that he's surrounded at the moment by a lot of people who are mad about a lot of things that he's done. And you see that with people who are paying more for products because of tariffs. You see some people who discovered that when he talked about deporting people, well, it might be people they knew. And, oh my goodness, so they didn't expect that. And the left, I think, is somewhat energized by the not a king demonstrations and stuff after the military rally, that he might find himself a bit lonelier. And it'll be interesting to see if there's any kind of broader pull within the Republican Party. Do any Republicans on the Hill start getting a certain amount of flack on this and feel a little nervousness? And I don't know. I mean, if that happens, that could be significant, because the president, of course, has very narrow margins in both houses of Congress. So, if you get some foreign policy votes, and if he loses a half dozen people in either chamber, suddenly he's lost the chamber. And I think this will be a serious one. I don't think it. There's still a lot of hawks in the Republican Party, but I think these are folks who feel this very strongly, and are going to feel betrayed.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I really do. I think part of the problem, Doug, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like one of the big problems with Trump's first term is he had all these ideas, this vision, this MAGA ethos of ending the forever wars, and yet he probably didn't. I mean, of course he didn't. He didn't know the foreign policy establishment well enough to know what people to tap, to put in the right positions, to give him the advice he needed back then. And I think now too, to really push that agenda forward of ending the forever wars, of having a realist and restrained foreign policy. And I feel like he's really suffering because of that. I mean, you look at some of the people he's brought into office. I mean, Marco Rubio, for example. Now, in Rubio's defense, I don't really think he's a neocon anymore. I think he has changed a lot of his ways, and I have too, to be honest with you. I somebody could pin the same label and critique right on me as well. So it would be unfair for me to attack Marco Rubio. But it seems like even though he picked him for Secretary of State, there could have been others that would have been more in that MAGA ethos. Same thing with Waltz as National Security Advisor, right, although he stepped down from that role. And the list sort of goes on and on. Pete Hegseth was a neocon, says he's not anymore. Okay, whatever. But it feels like Trump, if maybe he was getting a different set of advice, would be making different decisions. What do you think about that?
Well, a different set of advice would probably help. But I think that I don't think Donald Trump is a committed, restrainer, or committed non-interventionist, or however you would want to put it. I mean, he has this very strong Jacksonian impulse. Yeah. So there are certain things he wants to do. And then if he wants to do them, he wants to go big. I mean, he wants to win, and he's quite willing to use military force. I mean, it strikes me in dealing with the Iranians is that, he blows up the JCPOA. I mean, why are we in this situation? Well, because he got rid of the agreement that was restraining them. So I think in part, he probably figured he had to get a different agreement. He couldn't just go back to the kind of what it was before. So he demands they give up reprocessing. Well, I mean, you can have agreement which restrains them and they still do some reprocessing. Well, he has to absolutely enforce what he wants, and then he's willing to go to war over that. I mean, it strikes me so that's not a restrainer. I mean, that's not a realist. I mean, this is somebody who's come up with, part of it I think may very well be emotion. I want to win this. I need to teach them a lesson. I represent America. Don't they understand? They're Iran. We are America. So I think there's a lot of that stuff there that even if he had different advice, it's not clear he'd follow it. I mean, now I wish he had more, in my view, sound advice, because I think he might be a little more cognizant of what he's about to walk into if he starts this. Because I do think that we're down a path that we have no idea where we're going to end up. And I hope it doesn't end up awful. But we've seen this before, and the movie didn't end well. And I'm very nervous about blowing up a much bigger, more significant country in the Middle East, and then hoping nothing bad happens. Nothing bad happens to, oil wells and to oil transit and the Straits of Hormuz. And you kind of go down the line of stuff that, wow, this could really be bad.
Yeah, I mean, the list of things that can happen. I mean, there's a lot of commentary out there. I mean, some really different things that could be out there. I mean, the Iranians do have, enriched uranium. I mean, if they got desperate and felt like their regime was in the, about to be destroyed, who's to say they don't take some ballistic missiles and put some, radioactive material on them and lob them at Jerusalem? I mean, that might sound crazy, but I didn't think we'd be talking about a war with Iran either. So, one thing I wanted to talk with you a little bit about is is the selection of advisors. Just going a little bit deeper on that. I don't know if you caught some of the interview between Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson. Bannon actually made some interesting little references about, and I don't want to go too far afield in it, but something about maybe Tucker being some sort of advisor. If you go to the very end of the War Room version of the Tucker Bannon talk, Bannon makes so actually, no, I'm sorry, it was on the Tucker version. I'm sorry, there's two different interviews. That if you go on Tucker Carlson Network and you go to the very end of the interview with Bannon keeps making this mention about Tucker maybe going on in being some sort of advisor or something like that. I have no idea if that's true or not. I mean, people know I'm a friend of Tucker's. Others are that come on this program. I've not asked him. That's his own personal business. But what do you make of that? I mean, the two have had a little bit of a falling out, but Donald Trump does seem like the forgiving type. I mean, J.D. Vance, I think, called Donald Trump Hitler, and now he's vice president. So do you think that could be the advisor that maybe Trump needs?
Well, I certainly think that Tucker Carlson, certainly on the restraint issues, would be great to have there. He had take some other positions I'm not as enthused about, but you would imagine he would make those arguments. He'd make them cogently. I mean, one of the problems that strikes me, I mean, in certain ways, I would compare Tucker Carlson to John Bolton in the sense that, this is somebody who has strong beliefs, not afraid to express them, and I think Trump likes that. On the other hand, you put that kind of person with Trump, and if the views differ, then there's kind of an explosion. So I'm not sure how long that kind of a position would last. I mean, Elon Musk, 4 or 5 months, however we want to, kind of take the time frame, whatever that time frame is. Part of it's that you have combustible people, and so whatever they say substantively, just imagine them in a room together day after day, and you can imagine sparks, flying. So. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd love to watch it and see what happens. So I'd love to give Tucker a chance to try to change the president's mind on some of these foreign policy issues, and we could see how long it went.
That would be one heck of an apprentice. Let me tell you, that would be epic. Well, you know what, Doug, I think this is a good place to sort of leave it. I mean, who knows? There's an open national security advisor position. Maybe that's what Tucker's in DC for. He said in the interviews he was going to be here for a few days, and Trump's back in town. So you never know. You never know. Well, Doug Bandow from CATO, I'm going to leave it there. Everybody, thanks for watching. If you like this, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to Deep Dive, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Well, that was fun.